audio book, A Closer Look at the Letter to Philemon by Dr. W.J. Tyree. Some thoughts by way of introduction. Have you ever wondered why the letters of the New Testament are arranged as they are? Why does Paul's letter to Rome come right after the book of Acts instead of somewhere further down the playlist? Could it be that God wanted more people to be exposed to the amazing study of guilt and grace, and knowing that we tend to run out of steam when reading through the Bible, wanted to make sure we got through Romans before running out of want to? Or perhaps they were arranged in chronological order, the order in which they were written and delivered. No, neither of these is true. As it turns out, the real reason Romans came first is that it's the longest. His letters are not arranged from most to least important, but from greater to lesser verbose. As a result, that tiny letter to Philemon ends up at the end of the line, just ahead of Hebrews, which is much longer than Philemon, but not known for sure to have been written by Paul. The letter to Philemon has no chapter divisions. That is to say, it's all one chapter, divided into 25 verses. Chronologically, it was written at about the same time as Ephesians and Colossians, but these letters do not appear side by side in the text for the reasons that we've already mentioned. The Philemon letter is different from the longer letters in at least a couple of other ways. First, it's addressed to an individual rather than a congregation. Think about Paul's letter to Timothy or Paul's letters to Titus. Typically, Paul addresses himself to a large number of believers at once and gives guidance and teaching that would be needed by the church in general. In Philemon's case, he writes directly to one individual and discusses a situation that might or might not have been useful or formative to the group at large. Since Philemon seems to have been living at Colossae at the time that he received his letter, he would have been on the receiving end of both a general congregational letter, the one that we call Colossians, and the more personal letter, which was addressed particularly to him. A second difference, and one that has only one other similar occurrence in the New Testament, is the fact that Philemon's letter takes on the form of a letter of reference. The Apostle John sends out a letter, the one we call 3 John, to introduce a man who was worthy of their help and encouragement. His name was Demetrius, and to warn against the selfish ambitions of another man, whose name was Diotrephes. Both John's letter and Paul's letter leave the reader to wonder whether or not their audience took the advice of the writer. This author hopes that they did. One similarity between this tiny tract and some of its larger cousins is Paul's authoritative hint that he would soon be coming for a visit. It's one thing to receive directives in a letter. It's quite another to come face to face with the powerful apostle and miracle worker in person. Here are a few examples from Paul's letter to Corinth, a congregation that sometimes needed a strong hand. In the letter we call 1 Corinthians, after giving directions on collecting funding for the famine-affected churches of Judea, Paul tells the Corinthian congregation that he intends to come personally to make sure the proceeds have been gathered and are ready to be sent to Jerusalem. Later, the apostle reminds the same congregation of his imminent visit and adds that members of the church from Philippi would be coming with him. Then, as he closes the letter we call 2 Corinthians, Paul warns some who had been opposing his authority that they should rearrange their thinking before he arrived to avoid forcing him to use his apostolic authority. Philemon evidently did not need, nor receive, such a strong-handed warning, but did get a gentle reminder of a future reunion. Paul says, "Confident of your obedience, I write to you, knowing that you will do even more than I ask. And one thing more, prepare a guest room for me, because I hope to be restored to you in answer to your prayers." From the text, it seems to this writer that Paul and Philemon were good friends, as well as brothers in Christ, and that Paul might well have stayed in that guest room on more than one occasion. However, the subject of this letter, a slave named Onesimus, the useful one, had the potential to change all of that. Written with a more gentle hand than many of his letters, Paul's tiny letter to Philemon carries a tremendous message. I've divided the letter into 5 smaller bites and plan to wax eloquent on each one. Join me then.